All right. Yeah. Reading some of your stories, and the class I hope will have all read some of that, especially The Plain of Jars, the title story from your new book. It strikes me that change is one of the central things that happens there. And of course, in a short story, we can see that drawn into close relief. But in this story, and well, tell us what The Plain of Jars refers to for the people who may not know.
Plain of Jars, as that covered photograph will hopefully illustrates, but it's a place in Laos. It was a ceremonial burial ground for people who had been living there for thousands of years. And these sandstone urns that they have are burial urns, and there were hundreds of them in this area of about 5,000 acres. And then they began to disappear during the Vietnam War. And I'd read about that as a teenager, and never thought I'd end up in Thailand or Laos.
But you did.
But I did. And then I said, well, maybe I'll get to see the Plain of Jars.
Tell us how you wound up there, Gary.
Well, it's part of the late 50s, early 60s floating battalion episode that the Marine Corps was doing when things began to happen in Southeast Asia in the late 50s and continued on. Really heated up, with the Vietnam War in '64, I think. And so we were there. Different battalions of Marines took turns being there on the Mekong River, located in northern Thailand on the river, but going over into Laos. And so we were there for a few months, and that was my experience there.
Okay, and a lot of the stories in Plain of Jars are about yours and other folks' experiences in the early stages of the Vietnam conflict.
Yeah. We always heard, I went in the Marines in '59, and then through the early '60s, we were hearing that, the war's going to break out any time. It's going to be in Southeast Asia. They always said Indochina rather than say Vietnam or Laos or Cambodia. Indochina, that's the next war. And so we were preparing for that. And and there had been shooting going on from about '58 on. Just sporadic things here and there, but it really heated up, and I guess in '63, that's when the Diem regime really getting out of hand, and there was conflicts between them and the Pathet Lao and the Viet Cong. Then the United States really got involved, sending in big contingents in Vietnam, not necessarily on the Mekong.
Okay. Well, this comes out relatively recently. This new collection came out in 2011 or 12?
2011. Yeah,
2011.
I'm trying to remember when it came out, because my short-term memory as you get older. Yeah. But I wrote the main story, Plain of Jars, in 2005.
Okay.
I know that's indelible there, but
why is that? Why did your thoughts return to Southeast Asia so many years later now?
The outbreak of the Iraqi War. All of a sudden, the news and the attention given to it began to bring back memories for me. And I had, over the years, had a series of dreams that, that bothered me for a long time. And also trying to write this story. Here's another story that I was trying to get done. Actually to deal with that time there. But with the outbreak of the Iraqi War and then confronting the same things going on, it seemed like there's history is really repeating itself. I began to write the story and finished it in a month. And since then, I haven't had any of those dreams. Mainly the one, I guess I had it about maybe 30, 35 times over the years. Be going down a corridor or through some brush, jungle kind of things. And it seemed like the further I'd go, the narrower, the smaller it'd become. And I'd always look behind me, and I'd have my gun with me, and I'd look behind me to see if guys were behind me. And it'd always be my little brother behind me, always. And my brother was in the Air Force. He wasn't in the Marine Corps, and he didn't even go overseas. But it was just, and I'd always wake up when that would happen. And knock on wood, I haven't had that dream since the story was written.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I helped myself. I believe that writing is therapeutic.
Mm-hmm. It sounded like your dream was telling you to get after that one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a therapeutic process.
Mm-hmm. It's also a political story in a lot of ways. It sounds to me like
Political?
Uh-huh. Well, in the sense that you don't think so?
I said I hope so.
Oh, you hope so? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I hope it is. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Most of the early part of the stories in the collection are told in real time as guys are headed into the service. Mm-hmm. This one is told in retrospect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
And how come? What is it about retrospect that you felt like lent itself to the politics of this story? And let me ask point blank, what are the politics of this story for you?
Well, again, I guess politically, the United States being involved in wars like that, and I wasn't putting it together when I was a teenager or a young guy in the Marine Corps. But later on, it just kept dragging on, getting worse, and I became angry about it. I got involved with the Vietnam Veterans Against the War. I was in Chicago in 1968 for the Democratic Convention. John Kerry was there. I didn't get to meet him, but he was part of our group. And I stayed anti-war until the war finally ended in '75. We joined the college protests, and then AIM was getting started at that time, so kind of linked those things together. But that's been many years. I would do it all over again if it happened. I saw the...
It sounds like you are doing it over again.
Yeah, I believe that. Well, the wars that I've grown up with have been the undeclared wars. You know, I mean, Korea, Vietnam, the Desert Storm, Iraqi war, Afghanistan. So, and it's worse, I think, for the young men. I'm getting really political now, but the suicides now among young returning veterans, I don't think the country's addressing that in the way it should. But it's kind of out of sight, out of mind things. Anyway.
I have heard people say that they believe that American Indians sometimes had an easier time coming back from war because of some of the social structures that were in place, like warrior societies. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the ways in which we're using this story in the class. We're talking about warrior societies. But I wonder, I don't know, do you find that that's the case?
I don't know. I wasn't trained as a warrior. I mean, of course, I hunted and trapped as a boy all the time. Killed a lot of game, when I was, so I knew how to use guns, and I was trained as a radio operator, and then I went into machine guns because I could make rank quicker, because I was gung-ho, as we use the term then. But no, I think that it's just, I believe it's all the young men who go in are warriors, and I don't think it's any easier or even harder. I think it's about the same.
Well, and warrior societies aren't available in all times and places, I think. That is, the Cherokee traditions surrounding war have not been with us for a very long time.
That's right. So I didn't grow up with that. In my Cherokee side or my Quapaw side, we weren't subject to that. So maybe if I'd grown up on, say, one of the Sioux reservations where they do those things.
Places where they have blacklegging societies and things like that. You think it might have been a little different.
Yeah.
But I wonder if you do find now that there are kinds of warrior societies that have grown up. Do you find that yourself interacting with other communities? You mentioned the Vietnam Veterans Against the War. Now, do you find yourself in conversation with other veterans?
No, I've kind of moved away from that. That's part of becoming the academic that I've become. I rarely do social things anyway.
I've been fortunate to have dinner with you, so I count myself lucky in that regard.
Great. Well, I'm lucky too. But no,
you only say that because I pay.
No, I'm in touch with a couple of guys I knew from back then, but I don't go to any of the things that they do, reunions and I'm not scornful of that or anything like that. But it's that feel that was way back then. And, but I'm glad that people are doing it. I'd like to see more young people being politically active and speaking out about things like that. Yeah, again, going back to the last of the Ofos, the last of the people. I've been told that my maternal grandfather, who I never knew, he died when I was a year old, that he was the last one in our community that could speak any Quapaw, or, fluently. I know words, but none of us, my mother couldn't speak it, and he died, and they say that was the last person. So I've always heard this, people the last of this, or, I remember my grandmother, Cherokee, saying, well, those people in Kentucky still spoke in Cherokee. I was visiting one time, but in 1910, things like that. So always, that was always in my mind, about people, the last of, and the drinking cups of the gods. I bring this out in the stories that the plain of jars itself, many of the airplanes coming back from bombing Hanoi would drop their excess bombs on the plain of jars and destroyed a lot of those urns.
All bombs may be a little excessive, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Well, that notion of fragility, I think, really enters into a lot of your writing.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. And the protection that we ought to be thinking about in connection with that fragility.
Well, thank you. I like that idea.
Well, thank you for it.